What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Modern video, and today we're going to be taking a look at my top 5 Modern decks to currently play in the format. This is before we get Modern Horizons 3, before we get the Assassin's Creed Universes Beyond Modern set. And these decks are pretty tough. I mean, we've had 4 different regional championships take place over the last 2 weeks. That gave us a ton of information and a look into what the format is, so I think we kind of have a good idea. So I just wanted to collect my thoughts, give my reasonings about why I ranked these decks in a certain order, and why I think that they belong in the position that they're in, of course. So before we get too deep into it, if you are not subscribed to the channel and you want to see more content on the Modern and Pioneer format and other longer form content, please consider subscribing and ring the notification bell so you know when videos get posted. Be on the lookout on Saturdays. Me and my co-host Randy from Modern with Randy is hosting a podcast called the Casual Spikes Podcast, where we go over a lot of the Modern and Pioneer format and some other discussion topics there as well. So if you want to see that, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell. You'll also get notified when those videos go up, and we got a few episodes already, so you can kind of binge watch those en route to this Saturday's video. And of course, in the description down below, I will have a link to my Discord server if you want to go check out that as well and go over there to talk about Magic and everything. So without further ado and all that promo out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at our honorable mention before getting into our top 5 Modern decks for the Modern format. So first off, our honorable mention is going to be the Blue-Red Murktide deck. This deck, I think, has in kind of the same boat as Rakdos mid-range is in right now, so it might give away who number 5 is going to be. But overall, I think Murktide Regent has a solid game plan. It's definitely on the more reactive side than it is the proactive side, but can force your opponent to answer a lot of questions. You know, we have Ragavan is probably one of the best one-drops that we've ever had in Modern, and just getting to play this on turn 1, and then you can kind of snowball its effect even just with one hit, getting to play something like a Dragon Rage Channeler, and then you get to leave up like just a hard counter spell or what have you. You can even go into like Ledger Shredder and then like playing another 1-mana spell, maybe removing your opponent's 1-drop. They choose not to block their Ragavan, and then just getting a trigger off of the Ledger Shredder as well. There's definitely a few early turn plays that just this deck can create a lot of tempo, especially like on the play. And then on the draw, you know, you're going to be naturally just slightly behind, but if as long as you don't get way behind, this deck does have the potential to, you know, get it to an even state and then kind of tip the scales in its favor due to the aggressive nature of some of its creatures, like Ragavan again getting to snowball some, you know, mana advantage as well as potential card advantage. Dragon Rage Channeler getting to smooth out your draws a little bit to make it so you're not necessarily flooding out on lands. You're basically hitting lands when you want to, and then, you know, getting spells when you need them. Now, Subtlety can come in pretty clutch, even just getting to hard cast this thing like on turn 3 or even on turn 4, you know, just to kind of tempo your opponent. Another 3-power flyer, you know, getting in there and damaging your opponent. And then, of course, probably one of the best closers in the format in Murktide Regent, where you can just make a 2-mana 8/8, you know, just from playing the game naturally, casting your spells, countering your opponent's threats, and, you know, being able to play this and then leave up like Counterspell or something like a Stern Scolding, what have you, or even like an Unholy Heat for something that could get in its way so it can end up finishing the job. I was going to have this as like my, you know, just inside the top 5, but I don't think in good conscience, just with, you know, the little bit lower of a ceiling, but a little bit higher of a floor, like I have to go with, you know, my pick at number 5, just because of the sheer absurdity of what it's able to accomplish. So let's go ahead and take a look at our number 5 deck for Modern. At number 5, I have the Rakdos Scam deck. I just can't get away from it. The absurdity of a lot of its draws, coupled with even some of its mediocre draws being pretty decent overall, just kind of puts it over the edge for me. While I was debating on like writing the kind of script and how I wanted to order these decks, I did have it on the outside looking in at Is It Murktide? But then the more I really thought about it, like there's just some absurd lines that this deck gets, and that's just naturally what it's looking for anyway. You know, where you have just the turn 1, you know, Ragavan into Dauthi Voidwalker, or Orcish Bowmaster, whatever, and then kind of getting to go into like Fable the Mirror Breaker, what have you, or even just getting to go like turn 1 Ragavan, get a hit in, and then go turn 2 Fable, or even like the potential for Blood Moon as well. Going further into that, of course, like the draw to playing this deck is, you're evoking a Grief and then getting to Not Dead After All to bring it back, double Thoughtseize your opponent. You have a 4/3 Menace, and then of course if the aura leaves the battlefield, I believe it's the aura, yeah, when this aura is put into the graveyard, each opponent loses a life. So strictly better than some of the other 1 mana, Not Dead After All type effects. Of course, doesn't interfere with your Undying Evil, so definitely some upside there. And then just getting to snowball that into, turn 1 Grief, double Thoughtseize your opponent, turn 2 play a Dauthi Voidwalker, or dash a Ragavan to end up getting some mana, and then maybe you can lead into like a Thoughtseize, or even leave up an Undying Evil or another Not Dead After All to kind of tempo your opponent out and get your Ragavan back, or even get your Grief back, end up taking another one of their cards, and then just absolutely steamrolling your opponent from there. Obviously, I don't think this deck is as powerful as it was without Fury. Fury definitely gave it an option to close out a game super quickly and put your opponent into the abyss immediately on turn 1 without a good answer. Lightning Bolt was seeing more play than any other removal spell. It was kind of the removal spell of choice because it ended up dealing with Grief, but you couldn't deal with a Fury. And, if you had something like an Unholy Heat, it was going to be very hard for you to even get to Unholy Heat. You were going to have to draw another copy of it. Chances are your opponent's just taking all your removal spells, so really you're only going to have like 2 or 3 card types, so you're going to have to find a way to get another card type in the graveyard to end up being to deal with a Fury, but the damage is already going to be done, and it's just kind of a mess. This deck is miserable to play against, even now when, we've had the Fury banning, and Grief has definitely seen a steep drop-off after about the first month of the banning and everything, but I think this deck just has so many, like the ceiling on this deck is so much higher, and the floor is maybe a little bit lower than Murktide, but the ceiling is definitely higher to where I'm willing to put this ahead of Is It Murktide? And the fact that like you're just going to end up losing to the top of your opponent's deck if they draw well, and if they draw even slightly bad, you're going to be so far ahead at that point where the rest of your creatures are going to be able to close out the game. So number 5, I got Rakdos Scam solely for that reason, solely for the reason of just the absurdity that it's able to the cause and be able to run away with games. So that's number 5. Let's go ahead, jump over to the number 4 deck for the modern format. This one may be a little controversial, but I'll explain why. At number 4, I have the Amulet Titan deck. If you are not familiar with the Amulet Titan deck, you're essentially a deck that's trying to abuse the effect of Amulet of Vigor. When you have more of these in play, you actually get multiple untaps. So when you play cards like Gruul Turf, which of course wants to be all the way down over here, you have Boros Garrison, then you have the other one, Simic Growth Chamber, you're able to untap these lands, add 2, essentially get 2 mana if you have 1 amulet in play, 4 mana if you have 2, 6 mana if you have 3, so on. And you're able to abuse kind of having multiple land drops and stuff to be able to cast early Primeval Titans, possibly Cultivator Colossuses, and end up, getting some combo of cards like Boros Garrison, Slayer Stronghold to give your Titan haste. Even with multiple untaps, you're able to kind of go through a chain where you can get like Simic Growth Chamber and Talaria Wests and go and get your Summoner's Pact for more Titans, to end up getting more Titans to get more lands, and kind of keep doing this combo where you can just keep getting more Titans, and then you're able to give them haste with Slayer Stronghold, attack, deal tons of damage to your opponent. You have this other option of having like Dryad of the Elysian Grove in play, and then having like Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. All your lands are mountains. Valakuts are going to trigger a bunch off of additional Primeval Titans, off of Cultivator Colossuses, deal tons of damage to your opponent. And in the event you don't have really any of that, you can just play an early One Ring and end up drawing a bunch of extra cards to hopefully find a starter like a Summoner's Pact, maybe another Primeval Titan, a Cultivator Colossus, even a Dryad to just like kind of get some extra lands going, or an Azusa. This deck overall, it is very powerful, and definitely in the hands of a skilled pilot, it is one of the best decks to play. And I think definitely earns its spot here. That said, like, due to the complexity of the deck, and there's some random, like, feel-bad moments where you end up drawing, like, the land that you want to tutor for. You know, it doesn't happen a lot, but I think it happens often enough sometimes that you just end up drawing a ton of air. You know, you have 33 lands in your deck. You know, sometimes you just draw 3 cards with the One Ring. I mean, chances are you're going to end up drawing, you know, maybe one spell, but if that one spell is like an Arboreal Grazer, like, sure, it can generate more mana, but, like, when you're looking for a starter like a Summoner's Pact, a Primeval Titan, Cultivator Colossus, something, you know, what have you, you know, even like Urza Sagas take a little bit of time to get going for getting your amulets and things like that. Compared to like what the other top decks are doing, I feel like there's not necessarily consistency issues. I think the deck is fairly consistent, but compared to some of the other decks that exist in the format and just their consistency on a game-to-game and a match-to-match basis, I think it's easy as a more inexperienced and even a relatively experienced Amulet player to feel a little bit of frustration when playing this deck, that you just end up like losing games that maybe if you're playing like another deck you shouldn't typically lose just because your draws didn't really fare all that well. The One Ring definitely helps with trying to draw extra cards, also giving you protection on your turn. But as we'll kind of find out, that there's some decks that don't necessarily care about the protection from the One Ring. So there's definitely some matchups where it kind of doesn't matter. You know, you're just end up drawing 3 cards and, you know, taking a damage essentially for all your troubles. So that's kind of my reason for Amulet Titan being number 4. I just think with the slight consistency issues, even with like the higher ceiling, I know I put, you know, a deck that had necessarily a lower floor but a higher ceiling in ahead of like Murktide. But I think when you're trying to talk about, you know, the top 3 best decks in the format, I think that there is, you know, a lot more consistency in a game-to-game basis than something like Amulet Titan, and I think is a little bit better at fighting through some of the hate that is presented to them in the format. Not saying Amulet Titan can't. I think like all 4 of these decks are very, very good choices, and all have a claim to being the number 1 deck. You can certainly craft an argument for me to believe you that this could be one of the top decks. Just for me, I think it's at 4. The complexity of like some of the lines once you get past kind of the main line, some of the blowout potential with cards like Boseiju when you try to play, you know, a bounce land and then you just never get to untap it and make a ton of mana. You end up getting taken off by a turn or two. And as we've seen in Modern, you know, being a turn or two late is definitely devastating when your opponent is able to punish it. And a lot of the top decks are able to punish, you know, that turn or two of like lapse in, you know, power and lapse in, you know, working towards closing out the game. So that's Amulet Titan. It's number 4 for me. Let's go ahead and take a look at the number 3 deck in the Modern format. At number 3, we have Living End. This is a deck that a while ago I said was one of the easier decks to pilot, and for a pretty good reason. In this deck, you're essentially mulliganing to find like 1 land. You're playing 15 lands in this deck. You know, you have an Otawara to kind of deal with some, you know, graveyard hate main deck, you know, dealing with like main deck chalices, which is something you'll probably see a little bit more often. And then you have like an Otawara kind of for the same reason. You could just interact with some things, like you interact with like Teferi in this way. And you have a bunch of creatures that end up cycling for 1 or 2 mana to eventually find like a Violent Outburst or a Shardless Agent, cast Living End, which is then going to bring, you know, all of your creatures that are in the graveyard into play, and then destroy all creatures in play, and then you bring all your creatures back. You know, Living End, you know, virtually, it's weird. Living End is a really weird card. It also plays around Grafdigger's Cage, which is a card that people constantly bring in against Living End, and you know, just it does nothing for it. Don't do it. So why is this deck only number 3? I mean, it won 2 of the 3 regional championships the past weekend. It's seeing uptick in play. I mean, here the deck list won the Modern Showcase on February 10th. So why is it only the 3rd place deck? Well, definitely you could have some consistency issues for certain, you know, where I think Titan has, you know, a lot of lands. I mean, for good reason, because it is essentially a lands matter deck. This deck is playing very few lands. Of course, it's playing like Oliphant and Generous Ent. So really, if you have like 1 land, like these are essentially like lands 2 and 3 to get up to something like a Shardless Agent or a Violent Outburst. And a lot of these other cards too, when you cycle them, have like some added abilities to them. where, of course, Generous and Oliphant lets you get lands. Waker of Waves is going to let you look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand, the other into the graveyard. So this is like a way that you can get a land and then pitch like a creature, so you end up getting another creature on top of the Waker of Waves in your graveyard. This is also a way that you can get something like a Street Wraith or just another cycling creature, a Generous End or an Oliphant, which essentially become lands, and then, ditching the other card to the graveyard. This deck just has like plenty of different ways. Like, it just needs a starter. It needs one of its 15 lands. I would say statistically, when you're mulliganing down to 7 and even 6, and you're getting to draw 7 cards, I'd imagine in 14 cards, any one of those hands is going to have a 1-lander, and very likely to have a Generous End or an Oliphant to get you that second land. And then you have enough cyclers to where you're going to eventually find the third land. On top of that, too, when it's going for its Violent Outburst, which is kind of the reason why like these Cascade decks are so powerful, is getting to instant speed, play their 0 or I guess undefined cost card. This deck also gets to leave up Force Negation as like a way to interact with it. We have Subtlety to interact with some of the more powerful creatures, and again, like, it can just come back, and then in conjunction with like with Violent Outburst, where you can instant speed, bring it back, you can end up like essentially having another way to counter a creature, a planeswalker, and essentially just end the game. Grief is going to be able to make sure the coast is clear when you go for your Shardless Agent cascades on your opponent, and then get to put an additional 2 power into play. Architect of Will is coming back, messes with the top of your opponent's deck. The Curator of Mysteries, if you go for like kind of a baby living end, you are able to kind of like cycle some of your other creatures and then get some additional scries off Curator of Mysteries. So if you're not able to win the game with like the first living end, certainly the second one is going to close out the game. Street Wraith is a free cycle. Also with people playing like swamps and stuff like that, this can easily get in for unblockable damage. Oliphant has a pretty relevant ability to it, is whenever it attacks, another creature gets 2/0 and trample until end of turn. So you're able to kind of get through with your Generous End. It ends up being like a 7/7 like trampler. You end up having like, things like Waker of Waves ends up getting to trample through for big damage. These decks kind of going away from like Stripped Riverwinder, it looks like, which, was just a 5/5 hexproof creature, and it doesn't really need it anymore. Like, it just has a ton of other good threats that end up like kind of smoothing out draws a little bit. That this deck definitely has gotten a little bit higher of a floor, and of course, like, the ceiling is endless, because you could just end of turn Violent Outburst and completely wipe your opponent out. They play a creature, you just wipe the board, and even if your opponent manages to somehow counter your spell, like, you just have Force Negation backup, which is absolutely disgusting. And plenty of other tools on the sideboard as well to kind of help you in like those mirror matches, and help you in the other matchups where you can just kind of do your thing, and then blow your opponent out, and then cast your Cascade spell to win the game. So why is it a 3? I think from what the other decks offer, the other 2 decks offer you, as like a way to kind of combat this deck. I could definitely see in like the coming weeks, if we see Living End kind of winning more tournaments and things like that, I think there's an overall discussion that has to happen on like possibly the banning of like Violent Outburst. But I think currently as it stands, you have some ways of dealing with Shardless Agent, from dealing with Living End from the other 2 decks, whether it's just kind of winning the game a lot faster than, they can present kind of like their combo, or like disrupting their combo in ways, whether it's like in the sideboarded games. Because, I mean, this deck is kind of a, we're going to win game 1 90% of the time, and then we're just going to have to hope to win game 2 or game 3, which I think is a little bit less of a hope now, and more of like it has a real shot of winning those sideboarded games, even if your opponent draws hate. It's just not a deck that I'm willing to put up at 1 or 2 based on like one really good weekend, when the other times where it's done decent but hasn't had like necessarily the longevity that some of the other 2 decks that I put in here have. So I have it at 3. Could definitely move up as we kind of like develop the format a little bit more, and I think if it does move up to 3, I think we have to have the conversation now, but I think definitely as it moves up, I think you can almost assuredly expect like something like Violent Outburst or Shardless Agent to get banned. So that's my number 3 deck. That's Living End. Let's go ahead and take a look at the number 2 deck in the modern format. At number 2, I have the Golgari Yawgmoth deck. And it's bad. It feels bad playing against the deck that I have at number 1 when you're the Yawgmoth deck. But when you're playing against anybody else, it's fair game. Like, you can kind of eat them alive depending on like what their draws are. And even if they interact with like your creatures in a meaningful way or what have you, sometimes it just doesn't matter because you're just able to still win those games. You know, the power of Yawgmoth is that even if you are kind of like this removal heavy deck, there is a lot of like resistance that this deck is able to kind of put up, you know, with just the built-in resiliency of like Yawgmoth and Strangleroot Geist, where, you know, you kill them, they're just going to end up coming back. You have things like Chord of Calling, Eldritch Evolution to kind of build up into your Yawgmoth, Shielded if you want to like kind of close out the game on like an empty board, you know, and any of these other like kind of utility creatures that end up taking in Eldritch Evolution very well. And with the added bonus from the return to like the wow, I don't know why I was going to call it Kaldheim. With Agatha's Soul's Cauldron from the Wilds of Eldraine set, that's the one. You just extra don't care about, you know, the removal spells. While, yeah, you are a little bit more susceptible to, like, the Graveyard Hate, you kind of, like, force your opponent to, like, play this game of, like, okay, if you're going to have Graveyard Hate, Soul's Cauldron doesn't do anything, but, like, just getting to do my normal thing pre-Cauldron is totally fine and is eventually going to win the game. If your opponent's going to interact with the creatures or, you know, try to hold up for the combo, well, and guess what? Like, if they try to stop the combo, then you kind of play like this beatdown strategy and like this tempo strategy in a way, and then your opponent eventually has to try to answer the board. And in that case, then like Agatha's Soul's Cauldron kind of gets to run wild, unlike the creatures that do get to survive, or, you know, you just kind of combo in response to like them trying to interact with it in a meaningful way, end up drawing a bunch of cards, and then potentially winning the game from there. It just kind of zigs. It zigs when you want to zag, and it zags when you want to zig. It just has these different avenues and different ways of cobbling together a win, whether it's getting the actual, you know, like Blood Artist, Undying Creatures, and Yawgmoth plan going, whether it's getting a ton of creatures in the graveyard, you know, resolving a Grist, and then Grist going nuclear, and absolutely just making your opponent lose 10 to 12 life over the course of a game. Grist also getting to be found off Chord of Calling, Eldritch Evolution. There's just so many lines. Like, it's a deck that has like a little bit of the complexity that you have from the Titan deck, while also just a lot of consistency and being a deck that has performed very well in modern challenges, in showcases, in physical tournaments, has come out in, you know, large amounts of players, and having a very high win rate as well, being up there with the deck that I actually have at number 1. So I think overall, just due to the sheer longevity, kind of the different tools and everything that this deck has to attack the format, I can't put Yawgmoth lower than Living End, because even, you know, if you ask like Yawgmoth players, I guess like Living End is a very good matchup. Personally, for me, I don't think it's like as good as what they might think it is, but there is definitely some tools where you can kind of endurance them, and then like you get back in endurance plus some other things. Like Yawgmoth in a way can let you like sack your board to put everything in the graveyard, and then of course you can like even activate his ability to then like discard cards and proliferate, which means that you just discard other creature cards, and then, you know, those cards get brought back from like Living Ends and things like that. It can like go pretty fast and beat some of the other like faster combo decks and kind of like knock them off center enough to where you can just go in combo, because all of your other things just kind of feed into eventually getting to the point where you can chord for that Blood Artist or chord for like the Yawgmoth, and then start drawing a bunch of cards, and then, you know, get to a point where you have full grip and then can untap and end up winning the game. You can kind of get around like one rank protection because you can just kind of go off at instant speed. So even if you just like put like your combo in play and your opponent's tapped out, you say go. As soon as they untap, you're able to kind of go for it. Or if they even think about taking a game action, you can do it. It's just kind of the threat looms there, and like basically put your opponent in like a no-win situation where they have to have multiple answers to deal with kind of like what's going on here. So I have Yawgmoth at 2. I think it definitely deserves to be here. It just consistency, the longevity, the, you know, the inevitability that this deck has. You know, it has a lot of the tools, and a lot of the tools that I liked from the, you know, from some of these other decks. I think it attacks the format in a way that you want to attack the format, and just with all the different combos and different interactions and things like that, there's some very good Yawgmoth players out there, and they are able to kind of, throw down with a lot of the other big dogs in the format and, come out on top, and while I don't think necessarily the number one deck is such a bad matchup for this deck where it's like unwinnable, I just think that you have to play very, very well and draw very, very well, which is kind of like the name of Modern anyway. So I have Yawgmoth at 2. Let's go ahead and do the grand finale of what I think is the number one deck in the Modern format. And probably to no one's surprise, at number 1, we have the Crashing Footfalls deck. This deck is nuts. Just the sheer consistency and how interactive a Cascade deck can actually be while getting to maintain its own game plan, able to kind of tempo you out, it's able to kind of control you out, able to aggro you out. It does a little bit of everything very well. I would say definitely a jack of all trades. And when you couple it in with the Rainbow Rhinos variant, where you're playing like Leyline of the Guild Pact and Scion of Draco, and you're just able to give your Rhinos, Vigilance, Lifelink, First Strike, Hexproof, on top of, already having Trample. And, you definitely come into the scenario where I kind of referred to like the Hogak scenario where way back when during like Mythic Championship 4, you had people that were playing just regular traditional Hogak. You had people that were playing Hogak with 4 Leyline of the Void main deck, so that they were worse against the field, but they were better against Hogak itself that was not playing Leyline of the Void. And then you had like the rest of the field, and I think we're kind of getting to that point with like Crashing Footfalls. Living End and maybe possibly Yawgmoth can kind of knock them off, because I think while Living End has a better matchup against, Crashing Footfalls in general, I think there's also some variants of Crashing Footfalls that are just going to absolutely like kind of blow out the Living End deck. And then, of course, like both Rhinos variants are, while not seeing a lot of play yet, combined, are definitely pretty good against like Yawgmoth and things like that. So definitely Crashing Footfalls is getting to that point where it is the best deck. It has finally claimed its spot as the number one deck. A deck that gets to play something like Dismember, which is going to kill like 90% of the format when it doesn't really care about its own life total. Getting to cast Flame of Nor when you have like Tishana's Tidebinder to kind of stop your opponent from playing main deck Chalice of the Void, where you can, put a Footfalls on suspend, just make your land drops, and then you go to cast it from suspend, and your opponent's like, counter your Crashing Footfalls, my Chalice on 0. Tishana's Tidebinder to counter the Chalice, and then like the Chalice just doesn't matter anymore because it loses all of its abilities as long as Tishana's in play. And then you get your Footfalls, and just from there you just kind of snowball the advantage. You have Dead Gone, Fire Ice is like early interaction, Lorien Revealed to make sure that you hit your land drops, Mystical Dispute for the blue decks, Force a Negation for the turns where you like go and Violent Outburst on your opponent's end step, and then you're able to leave up Force a Negation back up, able to Force a Negation your opponent's like Shardless Agent Cascades. And on top of that too, like if you thought that just making a bunch of Rhinos wasn't enough, this deck also gets to play Murktide Regent, played as an 8/8 for 2 mana, and again like get to leave up some of its other interactive pieces. And then this is going to close out the game very quickly in conjunction with multiple Rhinos. On top of that, too, even going further, there's a lot of draws as well that this like decks can't beat from this deck, where you go like turn 3 Shardless, turn 4 Violent Outburst or whatever, or turn 3 Violent Outburst, turn 4 Shardless, and whatever like what combination you want to do it in. When you cascade for 2-3 turns in a row and you end up putting 8, 16, 24 power into play over the course of 3 turns, and there's not really many other decks that can compete with it. I think the Rainbow Rhinos deck, where if you have your combo of like Leyline plus Scion, it doesn't matter what the other Rhinos player draw, how many times they cascade. If you just get to cascade once, like you're in pretty good shape. Just how like the racing and stuff will work. But short of that, I mean, this deck just can run you over. It can finesse you. It's crazy. It's like it checks off a lot of the boxes. It does everything well and does everything, like the second or third best, as like a combo deck and everything. Could there be some better like combo decks? Possibly. But the fact that it can combo, it can counter, if you tried to, it can counter you trying to kill its threats with like Tishana in some ways, where if you try to like Chalice or try to engineer explosives, it can actually just counter, like your force and negations if you want to try to interact with it, when it's trying to cascade. And they punish you for it by just countering your spell and then running you over with Rhinos. I just can't say anything more about this deck. It checks off all the boxes. It gets to do all the fun things. It gets all the great tools and, gets around kind of like that restriction in a way of, playing a Cascade deck to end up getting like the one spell that you want. Crashing Footfalls is definitely kind of cemented its place as probably one of the best modern decks that we've seen here recently. And I don't see any reason for it to not continue to dominate. And see the discussions of like if something like a Violent Outburst should be banned. Should we ban all Cascade cards? Should we just ban Footfalls? There's going to be a lot of discussions that take place, and Footfalls is going to be kind of at the center of what is going on. And, could we see something kind of come from a potential banning of Violent Outburst? We could see Rhinos kind of shift into a different shell and kind of play, like these 4 and 5 color variants that we've seen. We could even see them shift more into the, Leyline Gilpack, Cyana Draco, just because, again, cascading into a Crashing Footfalls and putting like 8 lifelink, vigilance, trample, first strike damage, hexproof damage in play is still very powerful and still pretty hard to interact with, all things considered. So that is my top 5 modern decks for the modern format. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, of course. Leave a comment down below if you think I got it right. Where would you necessarily rank your top 5 decks in the modern format? I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. Or if you'd rather tell me over in Discord, I have a link in the description to my Discord server as well. If you want to join over there and tell me in the server, I would really appreciate it. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.